You made a business out of corporate espionage, which I think most people have never heard of this. And if they have, they think you're like, I don't know, rappelling down Mission Impossible style into a semiconductor factory and stealing the plans, or doing some sort of IP theft like we see from nation states like China, for example. What were you actually doing?
Yeah, so when I was a young guy, I wanted to be an actor. I moved to New York. Actors need survival jobs. Who stumbles into a career as a corporate spy? But that's what happened to me. I went to work for this woman who had this small corporate espionage firm that specialized in Wall Street. And our job was to use the good old fashioned telephone and social engineering, what I call rusing,
Hmm.
to get people in corporations to tell us anything and everything that that firm's biggest rivals wanted to know.
Yeah, okay. This is something we're going to unpack, but it is funny that you stumbled into a job as a corporate spy, because I think most people end up working at Starbucks or a cafe or serving waiting tables because of the audition schedule, and you can work at night, or you're a bartender somewhere. You're like, "No, I'm going to call corporations and just borrow information." Social engineering is what you called it, and which is, what everybody, that's the name of it. And I think we've talked about that a lot on the show, because I used to do something similar, not rusing, but with the social engineering, and I was co-hosting the Social Engineer podcast for a while. But it's funny just how well, one, it's better paid, but in theory, and it's funny. It's a funny industry to fall into, because it actually matches your skills perfectly as an actor, I would imagine.
Yeah, well, the woman who had this secretive firm, she only hired actors because we were the only ones that could do this job, because we would create voices, accents, personas, characters to basically trick people into telling us things they shouldn't tell us. And even more, that she only hired actors in the beginning. She only hired women. She felt that only women could do this kind of spying. And I recently did an event with former CIA spy Valerie Plame, and I mentioned that, and Valerie said, "Well, of course, women are better spies," and we laughed about that. But then she explained why, and she was saying that women are able to reflect and deflect better than men. They don't get their kind of their backup, so to speak, in certain situations, so they could be more chameleon-like. And I think that was true. And in the beginning, the women were better spies. My buddy got me the job. He was the first man this woman had ever hired, and then I was the second and last man she ever hired. Everyone after us, they were all women. And we struggled. The women were better for a long time, and we had to learn what ploys played to our strengths as men versus the ploys that the women were using. And that was kind of one of the fascinating things, developing all these different ploys.
Yeah, I want to break down some of these ploys. I have some notes on this, but I'm curious what the difference is between men and women. I mean, first at first glance, it seems like guys are, I mean, we're pretty simple creatures in many ways. So if you're a woman, you can sort of hint that you want some kind of personal relationship, maybe. Whereas with a guy and a woman, you have to probably, be a little bit more emotionally comforting and not necessarily dangle the carrot that you're going to be a side piece.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. One of the first days on the job, I think it was the first week, this woman who was training me is making one of these rusing phone calls, getting people in corporations to release private, secret information they should never release, and she starts crying on the phone, and she's basically saying that my boss is going to fire me. I have screwed up. And I lost the list, or I lost this information. It had already been sent over to us. I need it again. Oh my God, I'm going to lose my job. And to my shock, the woman on the other end of the line said, "Oh, hey, relax. It's okay. My boss is a jerk too. Don't worry. I'm going to help you. What do you need?" And I couldn't believe it. I could not believe that crying on the phone, playing kind of, put upon assistant or put upon receptionist to another put upon receptionist was so successful in getting
Yeah.
information. But that was one of the ploys that the women used to great advantage.
I I would assume you can't really do that, or at least if you do, you probably have to be maybe lay it on a little bit less thick, right?
Oh, we couldn't do that at all. And trust me, I tried. Now, I never broke down and cried on the phone,
I was
at
gonna
least
see.
not
I
yet.
was gonna say, yeah,
But I did try to play the put upon When I would call the gatekeepers, who back in the day were mainly women, that's changed a lot. The book kind of starts in around early 90s and goes into, right around the crash of 2008. It's changed a lot since then. The guys, my buddy and I, we had to figure out, how are we going to get information? Because the ploys that the women were using and teaching us, we were completely unsuccessful using. And so we kind of put our heads together and started to go, well, how are we going to how are we going to get this information? And what we began to learn, much to our shock again, was that we would go directly to the major executives and we would go bro to bro, head to head. And we couldn't believe it, but we would pose as an executive in a different office, oftentimes using accents. This is Gerhard calling from the office in Frankfurt, Germany. We have the European Union regulators here, and we need some information from the States. Oh, hey, Gerhard, buddy. Yeah, I never spoke to you before, but I know you run compliance in Germany, or, well, you're based in the London. Oh, hey, what's going on? How can I help you? What do you need, buddy?
That's funny. That's a damn good German accent. And I lived in Germany for a long time, and I don't even think I could do. I mean, that was really extremely convincing.
Oh,
And
thank you.
which is funny because a lot of Germans are going to be like, I didn't hear any accent at all.
Well, it's funny. I've done some events with Germans in the audience, and when I've broken into that accent, I've seen them fall out of their chairs.
Yeah. Like,
They
that's
really.
not what we sound like, is it? Yeah, it is. Sure is, man. Um, that's really funny. I want to back up a little bit. What kind of info were you looking for, and why was it valuable? You sort of mentioned the personnel stuff, but tell us why this is actually valuable.
Yeah. So when we started, of course, it was kind of pre-LinkedIn, and so back pre-LinkedIn, and of course, this is why LinkedIn is a multi-billion-dollar, hugely successful company. There was no way for people to know who worked at a firm,
Hmm.
what their titles were, what they did, and most importantly, who the rock stars were at firms, who the top producers were, who the top salespeople, the top traders, the top designers, the top developers, the top marketers, the top bankers. And what we learned is that we could learn, basically obtain the information on the firm's internal rankings metrics. So we could basically, again, using our spying techniques, we would find out the list of the top salespeople, the list of the top traders with their revenue. Literally, like, this guy did this much last year, this woman did that much last year. And so then we would sell that information to their rivals so that now they're able to poach those individuals. And you think about it, I always go back to football. Good old Tom Brady was with the New England Patriots. And when he left in free agency and went to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, what happened? They won a Super Bowl. Same thing in corporate America. If you can poach the Tom Bradys, or the people one notch below the Tom Bradys, it can make a unbelievable difference to your firm's bottom line, revenues, stock price, rankings in the industry. It's really a game changer. And even today, as much information as there is on LinkedIn, LinkedIn still cannot tell you who the rock stars are. And that's why corporate spying is, alive and well today.
I was going to ask about that, and I'll probably save some of those questions for later. But I was curious, how LinkedIn has changed the game and things like that. And we'll get into that. I want to go back to social engineering, because you're using social engineering and skills to get info on companies. And the book starts with this example of this woman, Zoe, who seems very sweet. I think a lot of people have the idea that you're just sort of slick Rick. You call the company, you find the right person, and they're bored, and they divulge all this information, and you never talk to them again. I think it says a lot about your skill in this area that you have these relationships for years and years. And I would imagine that that's actually quite efficient, right? Because you have to build the relationship potentially really slowly. Why burn that person right away and then have to start over when you call back?
No doubt. I mean, we called them, having a mole. And of course, these were moles that did not know they were moles. They
Mhm.
were giving us information because they believed we were an executive in a different office. And what was insane to us is that oftentimes, once someone believed that you were who you said you were that first time, now they basically, they believe it. So every
Mhm.
time you call, they think it's you again, and you're off site in a different office. You're traveling, you're meeting with US regulators, you're in Europe, you're in China, you're developing new business, all of these, ruses we would be telling. and using, and they're just giving you information every single time. So you're not starting over every time you call a firm, because calling a firm, this job was hard. A lot of people wanted to do this job, a lot of actors and musicians, because it was flexible. You could work from home, and this is back in the day when nobody could work from home. Obviously,
Right.
that's changed a lot since COVID. Um, and while at first, we were making $8 an hour. By the end of it, I was making $2 million a year, basically working for the largest companies in the world.
Right. So no longer $8 an hour, because there's not enough hours in a year to make 2 million if you're still making $8 an hour. Yeah, I suppose the
Yeah,
billing went up just a little bit.
yeah.
Uh, you mentioned in the book that you always want to throw in truth to any lie, and that seems really common whether we're talking about interrogation or any other kind of ruse. Why is that? Is that because it's easier to remember if most of it is truth, or at least, or it has a kernel of truth? What's going on there?
Look, a lot of times people would think like, I love that thing that you just said, slick Rick, that you're just picking up the phone and randomly dialing numbers and trying to get people to give you information. No, never, ever did we do that. We spent a lot of time doing research on the company before we would even dare to pick up a phone. We would research their stock price that day. We would read the press releases. We would read the annual report. We would do a Google search for news. We would know if the team in their city won the day before, if they lost the day before, if the coach was fired, if there'd been a tragedy in the whatever. We knew everything that was going on with that firm and where that firm was based, or where the individual we were going to call, where they were based. And so all of that information enabled us to create scenarios that, I like to say that my lies sounded better than the truth. Right. In a weird sort of way, my lies were more believable than what was true. And sometimes, and this is counterintuitive, the more outlandish a ruse was, the more outlandish the story or the ploy was, in a strange way, the more believable it became. You know how many times people said nine to Gerhardt and wouldn't give Gerhardt information? Never. Because what are the odds that somebody's calling you and putting on a German accent, right? Nobody's thinking that, right?
Yeah.
So that's an example of that outlandishness ending up sounding more believable.
There's a quote from somebody, and it's probably like related to the Nazis or something, but it's like a lie so big that people start to believe it. And this is obviously not, we're not talking about life and death here, but you're right. It's very hard to imagine that somebody is calling from a number, pretending to be a German guy, asking for random information. It's like, it just seems too ridiculous to be fake. Uh, and like there must be an easier way to do this than have some guy call me and pretend to be Gerhard so and so and get the name, and having done all this research, and he's asking me for what seems like kind of harmless information. I'm not giving him engine plans. I'm not giving him semiconductor designs. He's asking for personnel stuff. I mean, this has to be real. It's too boring.
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of yes, sort of no. But again, going back to corporations, if your firm is number 7 in an industry, but now you get the playbook on firms number 1, firm number 2, firm number 3, you see their staff, you see what they pay their people, the rankings of their people. It just gives you so much power over. Now you can steal people, poach people, and of course, when people leave a firm, what do they bring with them? They bring with them all of the information on how their rivals
Hmm.
work, their organizational structures, their operational systems, everything that they do that has made them successful. And of course, most importantly, they bring their client list. They know what the client contracts were, how much they were charging these clients. It really is a game changer when you can poach number 2 person, number 3 person, and ideally number 1 person from a rival firm.
That makes sense. So not only are you spying to get the information about who to poach, when those people come in, they are effectively unofficial, in a way, sort of spies, even though they're no longer in the other company. They just bring over so much intelligence. It's like a defection,
Yeah,
right? To use
exactly.
spy terminology.
Yeah,
They come over and
exactly.
tell everybody about the Soviet spy machine when they join
Exactly.
Uber.
Yeah, and that's why legendary Apple CEO Steve Jobs, he would not let the Apple designers be listed in the Apple corporate directory because he knew how incredibly valuable those people were, and that if somebody Google or whomever got their hands on one of imagine if you were able to poach the iPad designer in the early days of the development of the iPad. Forget
Hmm.
about that worth being billions of dollars. That's it's just an insane amount of money. And so and of course, Apple was one of the greatest firms in terms of secrecy, and Apple is, I would always say, the number one firm best at protecting their corporate secrets.
They're really good. I live right near their campus, and you can't visit people there unless you have a business meeting. You can't, and if you go, you're not allowed on certain floors. They have to meet you in certain public areas. You can't go to the office areas. You can't walk through the office area. Forget the research places. And there's no drones. And I think they have drone jamming or blocking stuff. They have windows that you can't see through with cameras, but that you can see out of. They have stuff apparently underground, although that's not something anybody would ever sort of confirm. And they have a lot of security people, not just physical security who keeps you out, but also they've got a lot of system security. So I know nothing's hack proof, but it would be very tough to sort of. You're not going to go in there and be like, I'm just changing some electrical sockets in the research area. Like, that is not going to fly at all. You'd have an escort. You'd have, it's just no way.
And also what Steve Jobs did is he took it one more level. What he would tell his employees is, if you talk about what goes on here, or you tell your wife or your friend or whatever, forget about getting fired. Of course you're going to get fired, but we're going to sue you. We're going to prosecute you too.
Mm.
So you think about that in terms of your employees. He really put the fear of God into them. And so people at Apple know that you cannot talk about what you do. You cannot tell anyone. And again, one of the very rare firms that has trained their employees, and that's something I talk about a lot when I'm on podcasts, when I speak at conferences, is you must, look, so much money is being spent, and understandably and rightly so, on cybersecurity. Ransomware is a huge issue, and it's just getting larger exponentially every day. And yet, a fraction of the amount of money that is spent on the technical side of cybersecurity is spent on the human side, training people, educating people. And at the end of the day, the weakest link in cybersecurity is always going to be the human being. If I can call your firm and get somebody on the inside to tell me anything I want to know just over the phone, I mean, you have no chance to stop me with the technical,
That was the basis of a talk I gave at something called DEF CON, which is a computer
Mhm.
security hacker conference years and years ago. And I basically used LinkedIn because it existed to get a bunch of military officers, Congress people, other powerful people to tell me things they weren't supposed to tell me because they were trying to help what they thought was a student who was actually just photos of my assistant and me on my phone. And it was a ruse. I didn't use the information. I just used it to give a talk, didn't divulge
Right.
any of the information. The only place that even saw any of it was the Electronic Frontiers Foundation, the EFF, because I needed legal cover, and then NPR because the journalist wanted to make sure that I was, not just making it up. And that was on the Social Engineer podcast and then the talk at DEF CON. And one of the things that we always say, or always said, because I'm no longer in that industry really, in social engineering is the human element is always the weakest, right? And there's other ways to say it that are not as nice. Like, you can't patch stupid is one of them that hackers always like to use. And it's true, because you can have two-factor authentication. You can have a key fob on your keys. You can have it so that they can't even log in from home, or they have to use a VPN, and there's facial recognition and blah, blah, blah. But if you know how to get the person to work around those security measures to give you what you want, it doesn't matter. None of it matters, right? I mean, they can be in a clean room with an escort right there. And if you push the right buttons, they're going to sneak that information out for you because it's important, or they love you, or whatever it is.
Right. Yeah, no, it's incredible. I mean, I always say I don't need to have really very good hacking skills because I can hack people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's the technical element is always kind of people who are really smart are always working on it. You can have cryptographic blockchain uncrackable security where a supercomputer needs to get to it, but if you can find the guy who's going to just unplug the thing, now you're
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah. And what's really sad and scary is that it can be a junior person in a
Mhm.
far-flung office. And by the way, that's who we were looking for. We were looking for
Sure.
the junior person in the far-flung office, because they're not being supervised. They've been with the firm 2 months, 6 months, whatever. And so they're not understanding the value of what we're looking for, what we're asking them to do. And so, and of course, they're also trained, the one thing people generally are trained to do is be a good teammate, right? Be a good corporate teammate, right? And so they're willing to help you and give you all this information, and they're basically defeating everything that everybody else on the technical side has set up.
That's interesting. It reminds me of some of these World War II spy stories where it's like they didn't turn the Japanese ambassador. They got in with the guy's secretary, and that was it. And that's all they needed. They didn't need to turn the high-ranking head of intelligence. They figured out how to get the secretary's letters because she threw them all in the same place and was too lazy to burn them or whatever it was. I can't remember now. But it's always something like that. And it's like, this person didn't follow protocol. Well, the guy who had all the information was meticulous, but the secretary who also had all the information didn't give a crap and always left early for lunch, whatever it was. Are you careful not to leave electronic trails and things like that when you do this? I would imagine that's you have to be careful not to get caught as well.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, there were a number of close calls. At a couple of points, I was being hunted. My buddy Pax and I, because we kind of were, he's the guy that got me the job, but we were kind of teamed up and really worked together and shared clients for a while. And at one point, the authorities were after us because they stumbled onto our trail, and obviously that was frightening because here we were, we were actors. Certainly in the beginning it was just a survival job. I was a working actor. I was doing major TV shows and doing off-Broadway plays with James Gandolfini and a lot of other cool stuff. So yeah, when we were being hunted, it definitely put the fear of God into us, and we became much more careful about our electronic trail.
I know you started in the 80s before internet, before a lot of tech, and you mentioned the best people are not on LinkedIn. Even now, they fly low under the radar. Well, wait, is that still true? It probably is, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Look, if you're a rock star, if you're a superstar at your firm, why do you want to be on LinkedIn? You're just going to get inundated with requests from, executive recruiters, aka headhunters, or people wanting to market you something or sell you something or recommend you, whatever. I mean, you're getting those messages all the time. It's kind of nonstop, right? And very rarely do any of them really apply, at least the ones that come through me. And so, people that are super successful at a firm, they're either not on LinkedIn or their profile's not up to date. It's listing them at an old job or in an old position. And so those are the people that the top corporations, that's who they're interested in. They call them passive candidates. That's who corporations want to take because they only want the best. Again, going back to the football analogy, corporate America is as cutthroat can be, just like the NFL, just like the NBA, right? They want to win the championship. And so how do you win a championship? You get the best talent. And so that's what they're looking for. They want to uncover, when I would research a firm, and the first thing you would do is you'd build the organizational chart of that firm, and you'd identify everybody in the firm. That's not 70% of the people that might be on LinkedIn. It's not 80%. It's not 90%. It's 99.99999% of the people in the exact role at that moment, with their salary, with the revenue they're producing with the firm, with an indication, we would kind of indicate who we thought was, most poachable and which individuals would bring the most strategic bang for the buck. And so then our clients would use that information to do exactly that.
How do you know who's poachable in an organization? What are you looking for?
Well, remember, we're finding out what they're getting paid, right? So again, non-public information. We're finding out what they're producing for the firm, again, non-public information. And those two numbers, a lot of times you can go, wow, look at this. We got a 26-year-old guy, man or woman. They're not getting paid a lot, but they're number 3 in their group, in their sales team, on their trading team, in terms of banking. And all of a sudden you see it's basically a young person who's killing it. There's an ideal person because their salary hasn't caught up yet, with their production. And so that is an ideal person for a rival to swoop in, because how would you know that this person's a rock star? How would you know that they're killing it? How would you know that they're still underpaid? right? Because you hired a spy to find that information.
Right. So then you call them and you go, look, I know you're probably really happy at your job, but we're really looking for people in your position. And our starting salary, you didn't hear this from me, is at $35,000 higher than what you're making now, or 20% higher than what you're making now. And you should negotiate that too. Just word to the wise. And the kid goes, huh, I do like it here. I did get hired by my friend, but 20% plus I should negotiate it. I mean, I might get 25% more money, 35% more money. Maybe I should at least take the meeting, right? And then then it's probably over from there, unless they're already rich for some reason.
Yeah, guaranteed. And by the way, it's probably more than a 20% bump or even a 30% bump. In some
Really?
cases, it's a 50% bump.
Oh wow.
It's
Yeah,
a
you
huge
can't
amount.
say no to that when you're that
Exactly.
age.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And then that person's gone, and again, look at the again, it's so damaging because now this firm has lost their up and coming superstar, and that superstar has gone to their biggest rival, right?
Right. And what they're probably not going to do is go to HR and go, hey, listen, so I got contacted by this headhunter and they're offering me way more money. Can you match this? I mean, that would be kind of smart, but it would also look pretty bad if they've been hired for a year or two to do that. And they might not want to risk it. They might just take the other job and leave in order to avoid having that awkward conversation.
Well, and also, now even if this young person in this scenario did this, the firm has got to make a decision like, well, is this really true? This seems like an insane amount of money that this kid is being offered. And yeah, they're doing a great job, but they've only been with this for a year and a half. Are we really going to pay this kid who's been with this for a year? You know what I mean? All of these things kind of come into play. Um,
Right. That's true.
and then
Yeah.
we see it in sports all the time where, we're just gone through NFL free agency. We see some players seem to get way more than anybody thought. Other players seem to get way less than anybody thought, right? It's the same thing in corporate America. Sometimes a firm, because they're in a position of desperation, they had a bad year, they had a bad quarter, their stock price isn't doing well, the CEO thinks they're about to lose their job, so they need to make a splash. So they need to grab somebody, and they're going to hire a spy, and they're going to we need to get some young people in here that are killing it. I don't care what we pay them. And so, that happens a lot.
I suppose, once you get the kid's name, it's not like, unless his performance takes a major dip or he dies or something like that, you can just call him next year, right? You can get this kid at any time from that company, right? You can probably pursue those relationships over and over and over again. Man, this is kind of an interesting niche, and it makes me wonder about all those phone calls I got when I was a lawyer on Wall Street doing
Yeah.
financial stuff, because we got those calls. I mean, I was there for like a week and a half and I started getting headhunter calls, and I was like, how do they even know I work here?
Yeah.
This is ridiculous. And of course it was LinkedIn or whatever, or a friend of a friend or something like that, or somebody from law school. But wow, it was really fast.
And there's an even dirtier side to it, right? So another big thing that firms are looking to do is they're looking to hire people to get them out of legal trouble, right? So, for example, let's say you're a Wall Street firm, and let's say you need somebody to come work for you in your compliance department. Well, you're going to try to hire somebody from one of the very same regulatory agencies that might be coming after you. Think about that. And by
Yeah.
the way, that happens all the time. Even though people aren't supposed to, it happens all the time that, XYZ bank or XYZ major corporation, publicly traded company is like, look, we've got this issue with this product. We've got this issue with this situation. How can we mitigate this? You know what? If we'd hired somebody from the very same firm that might prosecute us or fine us, that's probably going to help us. And it happens all the time.
Wow. Yeah. Like, hey, what if we can convince the person who's adjacent to this investigation that they should come and consult for us, and then call all of their old colleagues and be like, here's what we're doing to mitigate the problem. You don't need to take us to court. We'll negotiate with you directly. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's kind of scary, because you hope there are limits to that. But then also you're like, well, there probably aren't that many limits to that.
No, there are no limits to that. I
Scary.
mean,
Yeah.
somebody somewhere will tell us that there are limits to that, but in terms of real world applications, no limits.
You started as an actor, you started as a car salesman. How did those skills overlap? The acting thing is kind of self-explanatory. What about the car salesman stuff? I mean, is it just simply sales skills coming into play on the phone?
Yeah, but I mean, I come from a family. My great grandfather sold horse carriages before automobiles were invented. He became one of the first automobile dealers in Philadelphia. My grandfather took over that dealership. My father took over that dealership, and I was supposed to take over that dealership. And I fell in love with acting in college, wanted to move to New York to be an actor. But when I graduated, I just seemed insane to me. I didn't know anybody that had been an artist. So I went to work for my dad. And one of the things my father taught me was the biggest thing with selling anyone anything is you have to find out what their objection is, right? And you have to satisfy that objection. So is the objection the price? Is the objection the color? What is the objection? And you have to do your best to satisfy that. Well, it was the same thing with these rusing phone calls. You had to go, what is the objection? Why is somebody not willing to give me this information? What are they pushing back on? And that's something that is, that I would take into these ruse phone calls to use to get people to release information. Is I would always be focusing on satisfying the objection. And what was crazy is we got so good at it, I could hear the objection in the tone of their voice before they even said what the objection was out loud. And so that I could actually satisfy the objection before they'd voiced it, because I could hear it just even in the silence on the line.
That's interesting. When I did sales, I know what you mean. And I'm trying to figure out how to explain this particular phenomenon. Some of it is everybody there's a certain set of objections that everyone has, and you can sort of preempt those. But you can almost tell where it's going to come up in the timing of the conversation. And then you simply say something that will get them to maybe relax that objection. I'm trying to think of a good example. Do you happen to have one on the top of your head?
Well, time is a great one, right? With us, it was always an emergency. There was a crisis. There was a financial crisis. There was a regulatory crisis. There was a compliance crisis. There was a legal crisis, whatever, but there was a crisis. And even now, when, all of us are getting these phishing emails, phishing texts, phishing phone calls, and they also are using time, right? You've been hacked. This is a big problem. You need to do this right now. You need to click on this link right now because there's, and so it's the same thing. People are using time to get you to forget about your objections because you feel like, oh my God, I don't have time to object because this is such a crisis.
Sure. Yeah. Building urgency. Yeah. My wife's cousin was getting scammed. The police detective called her about some urgent situation. I can't remember all the details. And hey, you need to go right now, and you need to do all these different things and drive to, I don't know what it was. I don't think it was as dumb as going to Target and buying Amazon gift cards or whatever the scammers like to do, but it was something adjacent to that. And she gets in the elevator and she's on the phone, and they're keeping her on the phone. And then the supervisor comes on the phone, and the call drops because she goes into her underground parking structure in San Francisco. And when the call drops, she goes, wait a second. Wait a minute. Hold on. This is starting to, wait a minute. Now that I'm thinking about this, this is not making any sense. And then they called her back, and she was already suspicious. And what she was telling us was, if the call hadn't dropped, if I'd stayed on the phone, I would definitely have fallen for the scam, because they were not letting her off the phone. They don't want you to get off the phone and think, wait, hang on. So when you build urgency like that, that doesn't give them time to go, I have lunch right now and I've got a meeting after that. Let me call you back at 3 p.m. and give you the information you want. It's, oh, I better order delivery because this is happening right now on German time and it's 7 p.m. there. I got to get Gerhard the information that he needs or the whole company is in trouble. So I'm just going to call the Chinese restaurant and have them deliver it to the doorman and have them bring it up. And that's the kind of urgency that gets people that puts your critical thinking in a box neatly tucked away and complying with you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, we would almost never get the information coming back for it later. Almost never. The percentage would be ridiculous, like, 1 out of 100, 2 out of 100. In other words,
oh, wow.
We had to get the information right then and there. And so we would say that to say, look, people would have all of these objections about giving it to you right then and there. And that would be our job, is to go, look, we have to have this now. This is an emergency. And obviously we were very successful at doing that.
Hey, if you like what you're hearing and seeing, check out the Jordan Harbinger Show podcast feed. There's a lot more just like this. You can find the Jordan Harbinger Show in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Now, back to the show.
The acting skills seem like they're probably key. Do you think that the lack of ability to really play the part is a problem when people get into this industry? You mentioned that your first boss only hired actors. Is that in part because, I mean, yes, they'll take a flexible job, but is part of that, if you can't do it, if you can't play the part well, if you're corny, it's just not going to happen.
Yeah, no, I mean, I don't know anybody that was successful at being a corporate spy that didn't come out of an acting background. I'm sure there's one somewhere, but all the ones that I know of, that I either worked with or I trained personally, they all came from an acting background and had strong improvisational skills, and everybody had a facility with a certain accent. Like I have other accents I do, but the German was my go-to, and then the woman who trained me, hers was Irish. And my buddy Pax, he would go British. We all had our like go-to, character. And again, I think that that's something that only actors have, right? Now, of course, we're living in a strange world now where we've got this artificial intelligence software, which
Yeah.
can now imitate people's voices. So no longer do you have to go to Juilliard Drama School to be able to pretend to be the CEO of XYZ company, right? And that is already a frightening new frontier for social engineering, where now, artificial intelligence can actually, simulate your boss's voice. So now if you get a phone call and it sounds like your boss and they're using call spoofing to make the number appear as if it's your boss, why the heck are you not going to tell that individual anything and everything that they ask you for?
Yeah, now with the deep fake stuff, I mean, you're going to have to, it's for sensitive information, it's going to be like you have to go into a room with the person to have the conversation, which is so, I guess, or counter to everything we're used to now and sort of very anti-tech, right? Because you can't even get on, it's not like you can just jump on Zoom. What if that's also fake in 5 years?
Yeah.
Like I didn't have a conversation with you. I was on vacation in Bermuda. What are you talking about? We talked about the semiconductor design for an hour and a half yesterday. No, that wasn't me. I wondered why they wanted to do the call at 4 o'clock in the morning, right? Talking to some, and I wondered why the cadence of their voice was slightly off. Man.
Yeah, no, it is. It's really intense. I was joking the other day. I did a little recording again on a show, and I was saying, we're all going to need code names. We've all wanted to say we were Maverick, but now we're going to have our code name. Like I'm Maverick, and you're going to have your code name. And so when you call me, I'm going to say, hey, what's the code name? And you're going to go Condor, and I'm going to go Maverick, and we're going to go, okay, good. This is good. We know it. We're real.
Jeez.
But isn't that amazing that you're gonna got to have a code name with your wife, code name with your boss, so that when these deep fakes come, they're not going to know what the code name is. We hope, but again, as a corporate spy, if code names became a big thing, I'd be coming in and going, hey, I need the list of the code names for all the executives, and then I would get that list of the code names, and then I would funnel that to the hackers that were doing the deep fakes, and now we would know what the code names are, right? Again,
there's going to have to be sort of encrypted authentication where in order to see if you're talking with that person, they're going to have to authenticate on their device with their fingerprint. And then the app, which is going to be ideally a trusted encrypted third party kind of thing, is going to say, Jennifer has authenticated using her fingerprint and facial recognition. So you're actually talking to that person, not an AI version of that person. I mean, that probably already exists at least in some form. Why don't firms do this themselves? Why are you working for a third-party corporate spy organization? Why don't you why isn't your office underneath Jamie Dimon's over at Chase, for example?
That's funny. It's funny you mentioned JP Morgan. Look, corporations cannot directly hire spies. They need to have plausible deniability for obvious reasons. So corporations, and I'm here to tell you, people say, well, do all corporations hire spies? Yes, all corporations hire spies. But they do it through a consulting firm or they do it through an executive recruiting firm because they need to have some distance that if, Robert, gets taken down by, the NYPD or
I was going to say the FBI.
The FBI or the Securities and Exchange Commission or the U.S. Marshals or the Secret Service or all of them at the same time. They need to go, wow, Jamie Dimon needs to be able to say, I had no idea. Oh, my gosh, this is terrible. This is horrible. But I'm here to tell you that, back in my day of spying, and obviously I'm out of that industry, which is why I can write a book about it. But back in my day of spying, I personally presented my, extracted data to two individuals that today are one step from being CEOs of two of the largest companies in the world. So the individuals in the C-suites in America and globally are all too happy to take the data from corporate spies.
That makes total sense, right? So they might hire, Apple, for example, hires, I don't know, KPMG, who retains such and such, and then that other firm retains you, and supposedly nobody knows, but at the end of the day, occasionally, at least on those two occasions, you went in and they knew, and that was the end of that. And they probably went, maybe we shouldn't have this guy coming into our building up to the 18th floor next time, but what's done is done. I would imagine they thought about that at some point.
Yeah, I got to be honest with you, they didn't care. As a matter of fact, they were so happy to get that information. Yeah, the one in particular, and I detailed it in the book. I mean, the guy was practically jumping up and down at the data. I mean, he was just over the moon at how, the word he used was how actionable it was, which basically means they can make money off of it, right? And that's, at the end of the day, if they're going to pay a spy, and they were paying me obviously great money, they're paying me great money because they can make exponentially more off of that intelligence.
You talk about the Ben Franklin effect. I've mentioned that on this show before. Tell us what that is and how you use it, because I think it's not just for dubious ethical levels of persuasion. I mean, it's something you can use in your everyday life that is actually quite useful.
Well, meaning the idea that it's sort of counterintuitive that when somebody does something for you, right? Like somebody does a favor for you, I used to think that, okay, I do a favor for me, so now we'll reverse it, so you do one for me, I do one for you,
right? But quid pro quo. Yeah,
exactly. But the Ben Franklin effect is the opposite of that, which is that if I get you to do a favor for me, you now become much more likely to do another favor for me, and another favor for me, and another favor for me, because somehow we've created this thing where by me asking you, I'm sort of flattering you that you are very valuable to me, that you're very important to me, and that you're doing something that is very positive and good and helpful in this scenario for this corporation that theoretically we both work for. And of course, one of the things, again, that we would use in a ploy is I would always call in as someone higher than you in the organization.
Sure.
So if you're a vice president, I'm a senior vice president. If you're a senior vice president, I'm an executive vice president, right? I'm always going to be above you so that you're thinking, wow, I've got this big shot on the phone, big deal on the phone. I need to tread carefully. I need to win this guy over. I've heard great things about this guy. Never spoke to him before. Oh, maybe I was on one conference call. And so that's the thing about the Benjamin Franklin effect, that it's very, very strange how you can actually keep going back to the same person over and over and over for information, and they're happy to hear from you. They're happy to give you that information. It's very strange.
It makes sense, though, right? You've got the specter of authority. That always helps. So there's not only sort of a halo effect, I guess you could say, like, wow, this person's the chief of compliance, even though they're in another country, they're way outside your department. That's kind of a big deal. But there's also the specter, or at least the shadow of potential consequences. Like, okay, he's not in my department, he's not even in my region, but his colleagues are interfacing with my boss's boss, and there's a real life scenario where if I don't play ball here, that gets over to my boss's boss, which trickles down to my boss, and then I'm suddenly in trouble for not actually doing this. And it's
Correct.
Unspoken, right?
Yes. Yep. It's all unspoken. Yeah, it's exactly. You're using the cudgel of the corporate hierarchy to get people to release information they should not release.
I would imagine at some point people get wind of you doing this and the original strategies stop working, right? Because at first, when you're doing this and almost nobody else is, it's like no one's expecting it. They haven't been trained on it. It's like that movie, The Invention of Lying, which I know I've mentioned on the show before. Have you seen this movie, The Invention of Lying? With
No.
It's, oh gosh, Ricky Gervais. And he goes, I can't remember how he gets there. And I should really look this up because I retell this anecdote and I never know the plot. But he somehow ends up in a universe where nobody lies because it just hasn't happened before. Everyone just says the true thing. And so he starts lying. And people are like, wow, you know what happens after you die? You've got to tell everyone. And he's doing national talk show tours. And he's like, yeah, I know what happens when you die. And people are like mind blown that this guy, he's the only person in the world that knows. And they don't expect it, right? So when you're doing this and nobody is calling to try to get this secret information out of other people, they're complying. But after a while, after I would imagine a couple of years, it's like, okay, they told us in a meeting a few months ago that there might be calls like this and some are fake. This guy seems legit, but I don't know. They gave an example and this guy's using that exact example. Maybe I should just like call someone and ask, that you probably had to change your tactics at some point.
Well, of course we did. But again, I think your audience will be surprised how little emphasis corporations put on training their employees and educating their employees and telling their employees about this kind of thing. Yet they're spending millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions to protect the systems, the firewall, the network, the encryption, the server. And yet they're not telling people, hey, there's this good old fashioned social engineering via the telephone where people are getting all of this valuable information. We got to cut it out. Here we're going to have a giant Zoom meeting for the whole firm, and we're going to have somebody come in and show examples, or we're going to have a conference with the heads of all these departments, and we're going to say, look, this is how it goes. We're going to have Robert bring somebody up on stage and role play what one of these scam phishing calls looks like, right? No, they do not do that. They do not do that. They wait until, and let's say, for example, I call a firm, and let's say, for example, the first person I call is very savvy and realizes that there's something, amiss. And maybe that person then, sounds the alarm bells throughout the corporation. All of a sudden, emails get fired out, and that's basically how it happens. Like, oh my God, last second. There's no advanced planning. Now, I'm here to tell you that when I make that phone call and I find a savvy person, because remember, I can hear in the tone of their voice, I can hear in the silence on the line, what kind of shot I have at getting this information. I can hear it. And so when I hear somebody who is being truculent and I could just hear that they're not going to give me, the term we used is we put them to sleep. And the way we put them to sleep is because, look, I know I'm not going to get the information out of them. I can already tell before they've even said no. But what I don't want them to do is I don't want them to send the alarm bells. And so what I say to them is I said, hey, you know what? Would it be easier for you if I sent you an email where you saw this request? Oh my gosh, yes, yes, that's what I need. Okay, look, I'm going to send you an email. It'll have everything in it. It'll show you why this is so important, what I'm talking about. I'm going to shoot it over to you. I'll have it to you within, within the hour. I'll have it. Okay, great. Okay, look, I'm sorry I was doubting you. I don't mean to be suspicious, but I need to verify. No. You did the right thing. You did the right thing. I'll have it to you within an hour. Worst case scenario, by the end of the day. I'll have it to you by the end of the day. And if I get jammed up because I got some other fires here, first thing in the morning when you get in, it'll be on your desk. First thing in the morning, it'll be on your desk. Okay, great. Thanks. Yeah. Well, what have I done? I've gotten this person now they're expecting this email that's going to explain everything I've said so that it was completely legitimate, completely important for the corporation. But now I've bought myself time that now she or he has not told anybody else. They're not sending off an email to compliance or legal or whatever. Like we've got a problem. Somebody's coming in after information. So I bought myself time now that I can continue doing what I'm doing, and I'm going to find somebody else that is not as savvy, and they're going to give me the information.
What's especially brilliant about this is first you bought yourself an hour, then you bought yourself the rest of the day, then you bought yourself probably a full 24 hours or whatever. And in the meantime, what that person is not going to do is go, I should report this to security right away, because they're going to go, gosh, but then if I get this email in an hour or later today or tomorrow, I'm going to look like an idiot if I blew all these whistles and then I get this legitimate request. I'll just wait. I'll just wait until it comes in. And then, well, if it doesn't come in, then I'll do something. And then it doesn't come in and they're like, well, let me just give them a few more hours. Or maybe they already forgot, right? Because they don't want to look like a dumbass. And so you've bought yourself enough time to maybe go and get what you want from someplace else already and be long gone by then.
Yeah, exactly. And look, probably a good percentage of times the person forgets about the email, right? Because they're busy. They've moved on to another thing. They don't know now that I've gone to their colleague, two sections over, 2 floors down, and just gotten all the information that I needed.
Yeah, and I guess if they don't get it, they might go, well, I should have said something, but God, what was his name again? And when did he call me? Oh, well, whatever. He didn't get any information from me. I'm fine. That's his problem, right? Not having any idea that your job is done.
Yeah, yeah. And by the way, and even if they find out later, they get the email. By the way, our corporation was breached yesterday. There was all this information that was obtained. They were, then is that person going to say anything?
Oh, yeah. I had 24 hours advance notice, but I didn't say anything because the guy said he was going to send me an email. Like, I am not signing up for that chopping block. No way.
Yeah, yeah.
Brilliant. Brilliant. I know you worked in the defense industry as well as finance. That sounds more dangerous in that if I get some financial superstar people, the companies are pissed off, maybe there's a threat of litigation. But I don't know, if I get defense industry people, aren't you messing with, now you're messing with the government, the FBI, the district attorney, like that seems a little scarier.
Oh my gosh. Well, what's so funny about that is that was one of the first big projects that Pax and I did when we got this job, right? Was to go into the largest American defense contractors and find out about the top secret products, plans, back in the day, the avionics, the radar, AWACS, JSTARS, Joint Stars, all of these weapons programs. And we would find out who the designers were and who the project, this was all top secret information. Now, of course, that information we were getting wasn't being sold, thank God, to the Chinese, because that would be treason. It was just being sold to Lockheed's competitor, or Martin Marietta's competitor, or Boeing's competitor, right? But still, I was shocked that these people who are trained, now these people are trained, they've got to get security clearance to work in these groups. They are trained not to give this information out. And yet we were able to, through basic social engineering, again, what I call rusing, able to find out anything we wanted to know about top secret, military projects.
That should terrify everybody. Basically, I mean, everybody should be kind of worried about that, especially because I know folks are going, yeah, but they have better training now, or we have better systems now. And, one of the ruses you mentioned in the book was you leveraged the Y2K bug to get info. And a lot of people who might even be too young to know what that is, which makes me feel really old. But basically, the idea is all the computer systems are going to crash. And if I don't get this information to recode this thing, we're in crazy amounts of trouble. And if you're a defense contractor, like, you certainly don't want the missile program to not work because of the Y2K bug. But there's always some sort of Y2K-ish thing, maybe getting slightly less press, but there's always some consequences that are going to happen that you can lean on, I would imagine. Do you think about things in the news and go, oh, if I were still in the game, I would totally use this to get info?
All the time. I mean, look, ransomware attacks, that is money in the bank for a corporate spy. Basically every call, and again, obviously, I wouldn't be a very good spy if I wrote a book outing myself as a spy and I went back to spying. But I will tell you, one of the funniest things about the book is that when the book was released, I cannot tell you how many corporations reached out to hire me to spy for them.
Wow.
I know. And I said, you do know that I've outed myself as a spy. We don't care. That was really quite shocking to me.
Just use the German accent. Nobody will know, man.
Nobody will know.
I mean, you can get referral fees from referring your friends who are still in the game. If you want. But the ransomware is a great sort of topical thing, right? Ransomware, or like, I can imagine a call where you go, hey, look, you don't know this, nobody does, but we have been hit by a massive ransomware attack. And first of all, not only is no one going to get paid next Friday if we don't straighten this out, but certain projects that are key to the company are going to fail because all the data has been encrypted. I really need to know the following 3 or 5 things, like right now, because we're all going to be here for the next 3 days, high on caffeine, trying to fix this. And of course, someone's going to be like, "Oh my God, I've heard about ransomware. I watched CNN yesterday, and they talked about this." Right? So you're just riding the wave of their pre-programmed fears of something that's in the zeitgeist. Crazy.
Jordan, you clearly would have been a fantastic corporate spy.
Ransomware's a good AI. We just talked about this. Hey, AI, we got to talk about AI. I'm sure that's a thing too. Thank you for
Because
that. That's a
what I love
compliment.
about what you just did is you just created the whole ruse right there, right on the
Yeah.
spot. Like that
Yeah.
was genius. That was genius. As a matter of fact, I'm going back into the business now. I'm
Going
going
back
back.
into the business. Let's partner up, man. Let's partner up. Podcast money is not, it's okay, but we can do better.
Yeah.
Some of the stuff that you wrote about was quite interesting just from a recruiting standpoint as well, which of course you ended up going into recruiting, and I imagine a lot of the skills transferred over, but finding out what time executives answered their own phones, namely after the secretaries went home. I wonder if work from home has changed this at all. It seems like now executives probably answer their own phones all the time.
Yes, yeah, and I mean, and of course, look, the cell phone thing. One of the funny things about technology is, as a spy, some technology would be invented, right? And we'd go, "Oh my God, our career is
We're
over.
doomed,
It's
yeah.
fine. We're doomed. It's going to get so much harder." And then all of a sudden, you go, "Wait a second, this is going to make it easier." And so, and it happened again and again and again. Whatever corporate invention was, developed to prevent us from doing something, whatever the technology was, we ended up using it to our advantage, right? And so the same thing with, for example, cell phones. It has made it so much easier to get to people, right? And with call spoofing and a couple of other little tricks that I have, I can get anybody to pick up the phone. I can get anybody to pick up the phone. And so once I get you to pick up the phone, now I've got a shot. And even better if you're watching your kid's baseball game, right? Or you're on the Peloton in your house, even better, because now I've got you sort of a little unawares, not really in corporate head mode, at home, at the ball game, whatever. And
Yeah.
and now all of a sudden I can play look, I'm working my ass off. You might be on your Peloton, you might be at your kid's game, but I'm working my ass off here because we got a problem and I need your help.
I love this. It's so funny. You're just all these little subtle triggers, right? Like, oh, you're playing the sympathy card. Like, here I am at a ball game. I want to get off the phone because I'm at a ball game, but also this poor guy's stuck in the office. I can't really hear the background noise because I'm, again, at a ball game, so I don't notice that you're not in the place that you say that you are. And I'm not going to go and Google the number and make sure that it's legit. But the call spoofing is interesting. For people who don't know, this is where you tell people think caller ID just tells you the number someone's calling from. No, it tells you what the phone that's calling you says their number is, which is actually quite helpful in some ways, because what if you're calling from a switchboard? You don't want it to be that. You want it to be your direct line or not your direct line. But now you can spoof that and you can say, I'm calling from your mom's phone, the White House, corporate headquarters in another region. You can just tell caller ID what your number is. And if you know the number that they would be afraid to get a call from and not answer, now they're going to pick up the phone no matter what. They're going to trip over the cord to get that phone call.
Right. That's funny you use the mom one, because when when my book was about to be released, I started getting messages from a former corporate spy that I had trained who was still in the business. And he was panicking. And I just didn't want to deal with him. And so I didn't respond to his phone calls or his texts. And finally, one day I got a call from my mom and I answered it, and it was him. It was him.
That's funny.
He had spoofed me, which is great, spy versus spy. And
Yeah.
he was panicked. And this is the funny thing. He was panicked that my book was going to end his career as corporate spy, because my book was going to end corporate spying, that corporations
Sure.
were going to go, oh, which I was like, dude, you're going to be okay. Corporate spying is going to go on forever. It's not stopping anytime soon.
Well, also, you're welcome for writing an advertisement for our industry so that everybody who didn't even know it existed is now going, wait a second, I can hire these guys to get this information? That had never occurred to me. Right? Like, you might,
the people that were kind of
a couple tactics, and that's it, man.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
The people that were asleep at the wheel, corporate executives, are like, wait a second, we're the only ones in America that haven't hired a spy?
Right, exactly. It's like, take this, wait a minute, we got to be doing this. I bet you so-and-so's doing this. That's how they ended up getting the information. That's how they found out our top performers. I bet they hired these guys or somebody similar. And some of the tactics are just never not going to work. Like, tell me about the free ticket scam. This will never not work until there are no live events ever again.
Yeah. So, again, we found back in the day that we did much better going bro to bro, executive to executive, right? And so, And of course, remember, I'm calling guys back in the early days. We started Wall Street, right? So I'm calling Wall Street, honchos, Wall Street big shots, think, giant cigars and custom suits. And so I realized, I had to play to their ego, because they had big egos and they had, they were getting big bonus checks. And so, one of the ploys I came up with is we'd call them and go, look, you've been killing it. Your team is killing it. The firm loves you. And we got these box seats for the Knicks, blah, 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 on Tuesday night. And we want to give them to you and your team, right? And all I need is I just need the list of the guys to put on the thing because I got to fill the seat. So I need the names. And so the guy's like, well, yeah, sure. And he's going to give you the list of basically his trading team. And then I'm going to go, oh, and hey, you know what? We got a little extra room here. What about the sales guys that work with you? Oh, yeah. And all of a sudden you start getting all of this information. Now, again, maybe some of your listeners will go, well, how valuable really is that information? Well, I'm here to tell you that in 2006, there was a team at Morgan Stanley, 8-person team that did a trade that made Morgan Stanley $1 billion.
Jeez.
And I was hired to find out the names of the 8 people on that team. Why? Because the person that hired me, the firm that hired me, wanted to steal 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 of those people because they wanted to replicate those trades and make $1 billion. Well, you go again, audience might go, well, how hard could it be to find those 8 people? Well, I'm here to tell you, impossible, right? Impossible. Going back to the Steve Jobs things, he wouldn't even list the developers in the system. So how are you going to find them, right? And so again, getting that information on who these traders are, what teams they're on, who they work with, incredibly valuable. And then, of course, once I had the names in this scenario with the fake tickets, now I could call somebody else up because I had the list of the names and get the rankings. Go, hey, look, I've got to list these guys on a document in order of production. Can you pull the production sheet? I'm not supposed to list the production. Well, for the regulators, we're now required. Guess what? That's what they make us do. Oh, we're required to do that now? Okay. And now you've got the names and you've got their production. So you know who the top people are. And again, that is really valuable private information.
Calling from the compliance department is genius in so many ways. Because one, not only is it the specter of authority inside the company, but it's like, well, the regulators, like the government, basically the police now need this information. And if they also, so of course there's even more authority there. It's above the person who's calling. So it's like, even to me, I can't even do anything about it. I'm being pressed by the authorities. And so now I'm in turn putting that pressure on you in a way where like I'm shielding you from it, but I'm also not, because and also you're building the vibe of we're in this together. This isn't coming from inside the company. This is the company defending itself against the regulators. So now you've got this we're all in this together vibe. And on top of that, if they quote the rules and say, I'm not supposed to do that, you can say, relax, I know you're not. I'm the one who wrote the rules that said you're not supposed to do that. And I'm telling you now that you are. Oh, well, okay. In that case, I guess I have to, right? It's just like, there's layers to this that are just really, really, you can tell that you created this based on a lot of experience. This is not something you thought up in the shower one day.
Yeah, well, look, right now we have this amazing catastrophe with banks, right? And we've got all of these banks in Silicon Valley struggling, right? And going under and being bailed out. Well, I mean, for me, again, and we talked about how we would use current events, real-time events, to create ploys that would get us to be able to learn whatever we wanted to know. I'm telling you right now, I could find out anything about any bank anywhere in the country right now in 45 minutes or less, anything. And I would be using that ploy. I'd say, look, Credit Suisse just went under. We got to be careful we're not next. Regulators are so afraid because they feel like now they're getting criticized because they dropped the ball. And so now they're coming at us hard, and they need this, they need that, and they want it right now. And if we don't get it right now, they're going to put us on the list for extra stress testing, or they're going to put us on the list that we're in trouble and our stock price is going to plummet in 15 minutes. I need this information right now, right? Now, does that sound pretty legitimate? Yeah, it sounds pretty legitimate.
Yeah, like yeah. I'm nervous for that fake imaginary person who now has to go and get all this information and give it to you, because they really have to. They're skipping lunch. That person is definitely skipping lunch today. Oh man. How did you pick industries to work in? I guess it was just based on who hired you, but did all industries come in, or was it kind of like finance and then defense, and it was everybody else? Hey, look, we don't really do this.
Yeah. So when I started, the woman whose firm, the woman who hired me, she really specialized in Wall Street, and so that was kind of where I cut my teeth. But then obviously we had that big defense assignment, and then what started to happen, much to my surprise and shock, especially when I went out on my own, is that firms would find out about me, all through word of mouth, because obviously as a corporate spy, you weren't advertising. I didn't have a website, and corporations would find out about me, and then they would be in different industries. And a lot of times it would be because the consulting firm that was acting as the intermediary, the consulting firm worked in multiple industries, or the executive recruiting firm worked in multiple industries. And so that they would go, wow, this guy killed it for our banking client. They love this guy. I wonder how he would do with the pharmaceutical project. I wonder how he would do researching firms in Brazil. I wonder how he would do researching firms in China. I wonder how he would do if he had to, use different languages. I wonder, and so all of a sudden I started getting all of these different projects all over the world, in all different industries. I'm here to tell you, there's probably no country that has any kind of corporate presence that I didn't call. We called Latin America all the time. Obviously, we call Japan all the time, China all the time, India all the time, Russia, obviously all the European countries. Corporate spying is a global industry.
Did different industries require different tactics? Is defense different than finance, or is it kind of like the same ploy, different coat of paint?
That's a great question. Pretty similar. Yeah, pretty similar. I think that there's certain things that you would need to be aware of. So for example, if I was researching technology firms, obviously Wall Street, there's a little bit more of a sales element to Wall Street. Technology, obviously it's more technical. And so you're going to be dealing with more technical people. So you had to make sure your technical reasons, logic was a little higher, whereas maybe Wall Street, you'd be playing more emotion. Pharmaceutical companies are a little bit more staid, so you would have to be a little bit more aware of, okay, this is an industry that's a little bit more, buttoned up, so to speak.
Mhm.
So I need to just be aware of that in terms of how I'm talking to people,
I
but
see.
not as big a difference as you would think.
Yeah, it seems like the same type of thing would work. The free ticket scam, for example, some of those plays would work. But I get what you mean. On Wall Street, I would think if you're calling an investment banker, you're making jokes about staying up too late and drinking too much or doing a little bit too much of something else the previous night, so you got a hangover. Whereas if you call a pharmaceutical company, you're probably / maybe not doing that exact kind of thing, because then you
Right.
don't want them to view, like, this dumb bro guy called me talking about how he's hungover and he's asking me for this information. What a moron. Whereas you call Deutsche Bank and you get some young analyst or whatever, you're like, man, sorry, my brain is just melted. We were up at 1 Oak last night until like 4 o'clock in the morning. Anyway, here's what I need. And they're like, oh, me too. I don't like 1 Oak though. I go to Marquee now. Right. So
Yeah.
it's just like, you can really sort of build a relationship based on that. But yeah, Pfizer might have a slightly different corporate culture that you want to match, especially if you're pretending to be inside the company. Did you ever get heat on you or any investigations? I know you mentioned before that Pax had panicked. Your colleague Pax had panicked because he felt like somebody was watching him or something along those lines.
Yeah. So, at one point, there was this hacker, and now we're back in the mid 90s. And there was this, and this is the early days of, the internet was just becoming sort of commercially accessible. And there was this hacker who was, running around, doing things, hacking into the major phone companies at the time, who, of course, the internet was coming through the telephone lines back then. And the authorities thought this individual was trying to shut down the internet, right? And so they were going after this guy hard. And in their, investigation trying to find this guy, they eventually did sort of locate him, and then he went on the lam. He was on the run, and literally on the run from the U.S. Marshals, the Secret Service, the
Wow.
FBI, everybody, a laundry list of agencies. So now this guy is on the run. They're looking for him, and they're investigating. And sure enough, they stumble onto our trail. And that was a pretty scary time, because at that point we were still actors. I was doing Melrose Place and Star Trek Deep Space Nine, and and I had just done this exercise video dancing with O.J. Simpson right before the infamous murders. And all of a sudden I'm like, wow, the authorities are going to get quite a thrill out of like busting the guy that just worked with OJ. Maybe they'll put me up.
Yeah.
Maybe they'll think I did the murders.
Oh, geez.
So yeah, and here we had thought this job was, sort of in the gray area of legality. And when PAX first got contacted by the authorities who were hunting this hacker, it was a real kind of alarm bell that, maybe what we were doing, wasn't in the gray. Certainly it was in the very dark gray. And yeah, that was a really frightening time. That was a frightening situation. And then over the years, I had some other close calls as well. I don't know that I want to spoil them too much.
Sure. No problem. Yeah, the book is a good read, and we'll link to it in the show notes, as I always do. You said you worked with OJ on that music video, or like an exercise video. What was he like? Because you hear mixed accounts of the juice.
Yeah, so I was, again, so here I am. I have this survival job, and again, at that point in time, maybe I was making $12 an hour. I don't remember, but it was not the $2 million that it eventually turned into. And so I needed, acting jobs. My manager calls me up one day and he says, "Hey, look, I got a job on this exercise video. It's a couple days work. Pays pretty good. You get free sneakers." And at the time, my sneakers had holes in them, so it was a big deal. And I said, well, my manager's name was Bobby. He said, "Bobby, I'm the worst dancer in the history of mankind. I cannot be doing any, exercise dance video." And he said, no. It's an exercise video for guys. It's with O.J. Simpson. And I said, O.J. Simpson? He said, yeah, O.J. Simpson. It's going to be push-ups, sit-ups, pull-ups, and at the time I was a young guy. I was in shape. So I said, oh my God, I love O.J. Simpson. I'm in. So I show up on the set of the exercise video, and it's at a studio with a dance floor. There's a choreographer. And right away, the choreographer lines us up. There are two beautiful women, me, OJ, and a buddy of mine. And the choreographer shows us this routine, which was like a dance routine. And everybody does the dance routine perfectly. Even OJ did it pretty well, except for me, stumbling and bumbling and looking like a complete, doofus. And the choreographer comes over to fire me. He's like, "How did you get this job? Like, what the hell are you doing here?" And OJ says, "Whoa, whoa, 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 whoa. No. You can't get rid of Rob. Rob's dancing is so bad, it's making me look good. Rob stays."
Mm.
So basically, and I learned this then, number one rule in Hollywood is make the star look good,
Mm-hmm.
And OJ was nervous because, here he was doing these things and he didn't want to look like an idiot. And so there was somebody that was looking like an idiot for him. So somehow that bonded us. Somehow that created this thing where OJ was my best buddy. At one point, he pulls me aside and he says, "Hey, Rob, you want to see the new pilot I shot for NBC?" I said, "Yeah, sure." He says, "I play a knife expert." Now
Okay.
you cannot make this stuff up. This is all true. So he pops in the video cassette and he shows me this episode of him as a Navy SEAL knife expert, and and he's so excited about it because it's he shot the pilot. It's about to be a series. Obviously, that series never happened. But the thing that was most memorable about it was there was one of the two women was this beautiful blonde woman. Now, of course, at the time, I did not know Nicole Brown Simpson. But of course, once Nicole Brown Simpson was murdered and her picture was on TV, it was shocking how much this blonde woman in the exercise video resembled Nicole Brown Simpson. It was really staggering.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're on the set and he starts flirting with this woman in the exercise video, but not just flirting, basically sexually harassing her,
Yeah.
and saying the most terrible things, the most horrible things. And so all of a sudden, here I am, OJ's like my pal, but now he's saying these terrible things to this woman, which unfortunately back in the day, people put up with. But I pulled her aside and I said, "Hey, look, are you okay? We can call the Screen Actors Guild, and we can get a representative down here on set, and he'll have to stop." But she didn't want to make waves because she was hoping maybe to get a job like I was in the the Navy SEALs pilot.
Sure.
But that was something that was really really of course at the time he didn't realize it, to see this guy hitting on this woman in such an offensive, egregious manner, with such an edge, right? With such an edge. And of course, now we know that same edge, he was on edge, right? Because obviously his marriage had gone to hell. I guess his wife was, cheating on him in his mind, because he certainly was cheating on her. And obviously, I saw in that moment in time why those murders happened. I saw
Wow.
I saw his personality. I saw his true personality.
Man, that I would imagine once you found out what happened, did you think back like, oh, maybe I should have said something. Maybe we should have called Screen Actors Guild. I mean, there's nothing you could have done really, but do you think about that? Like what you would have done differently, maybe, if anything?
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I think about that all the time. And of course, as soon as I found out about the murders, I called the district attorney. And no surprise there, nobody ever called me back.
Yeah.
I was offered a lot of money to go on TV shows, and tell stories, but I didn't want to make money off of a horrible crime, so I didn't do any
Yeah.
of those things. But I did feel like the story that I had to tell had some value for the prosecution. I don't know that it would have been evidentiary, but I cannot believe to this day that nobody even called up to hear about that story.
They maybe they didn't need it. Maybe they had 100 more. I don't really know. I was too young when I didn't watch the trial. I wasn't really interested because I think I was like a young teenager. But maybe they had 100 more. I don't know. You're right though. There is something there, depending on the level of credibility and the memory and all that. But again, that maybe they just had so much evidence that they thought. I mean, they had what they thought was a lot of really good evidence. That's for damn sure. Did you ever impersonate people when you were doing the rusing? Because it seems like that would be. I mean, you made Gerhard or whatever, but was that a real person or was that just a cutout?
Yeah. Yeah, no, that was a real person because
Okay.
look, if you were impersonating someone that didn't exist, they can look, again,
True.
like they could look you up on the corporate intranet, and they
Right.
could go, well, there is no Gerhard in the Frankfurt office. Whereas if they looked you up on the internet and they see Gerhard, head of compliance, Gerhard, legal, Gerhard, whatever, then all of a sudden they go, oh, again, it's legitimate. And so what we would do is, again, being actors, is we would call up executives and we would hope to get their voicemail, and then we would listen to the voicemail. Hey, yeah, this is Mark Kelly. I'm not here. Leave a message. Well, now I can go, hey, this is Mark Kelly. And I can now imitate his voice. I only needed to hear a sentence or two that I could do a good enough job. Right. And, it was amazing. Sometimes, at one point I was imitating someone and the woman on the other end of the phone, she goes, I just saw you on CNBC.
Like so convincing, you sound just like the guy I watched on TV who is the real guy. Oh my gosh. Yeah. I'm actually calling from the car on the way back from studio. I hope I have 10 minutes to get this done.
And trust me, that's probably exactly what I said. I'm sure I said something like, how did I do? How did I look? And she, oh, you looked great. You sounded great. Oh, thank you. That's so nice of you. Anyway, I'm jammed up. This is what I need.
It's so funny. How has the internet changed the game? It seems like, if anything, people probably expect it to be harder because all this different information is out there. But I think it's probably, if anything, easier because a lot of information now that you would need for background, you don't have to fish it out. It's on the internet.
It's easier. It's so much easier, right? It's so much easier. Back in the day, there were a couple of gatekeepers that would have, information on the personnel, that would have information on salaries, that would have information on, new products, new product pricing, client contracts. There would only be a few people that would know that in a firm, they would be in the one department. Well, now that information is generally put into their intranet, right? So that you can find it out. Again, some far-flung junior analyst in some, the office in Kansas, might have access to that information. And even if they don't have access to that information, a lot of times you can then say to them, hey, so you get this junior person in Kansas who's willing to tell you anything and everything, but they only have access to a certain amount of stuff. You say, hey, what, can you do me a favor? Put me on hold and call over to this other office and ask them. Now that person is going to call over and they're they are an internal person. They're going to show up as an internal call. They don't have to do any call spoofing. And so a lot of times now you're making somebody within the firm turn into your own spy for you. Right now, of course, they don't know that they're spying, but that was another technique that we would use, that because now the person that they're calling is going, well, wait, what do you need this for? Oh, and I would give them a reason. I would help them, and they'd go, okay, well, you are with the firm, you are with us, you are legitimate. It doesn't make sense, but okay, you know. And now I've gotten a lot of really valuable information from some junior person in Kansas.
Incredible. Incredible. So I know we're running out of time here. Where else have these skills come in handy outside of rusing? I guess, actually, how can people develop these skills without actually making ruse calls, and why should people do so? Maybe that's a better question.
I don't know that they should. I don't know that they should. I mean,
Interesting.
obviously you've read the book, and I reckon a lot with the moral issues. I don't want your audience to come away with the thought that I'm proud of the career that I stumbled into, though it is a crazy fun story. But I don't think that people should develop those skills. I really don't. One of the things I really, tried hard to do, and I think I did pretty successfully, was to draw the line so that the ruse career was on the ruse phone calls. The ruse career was not going into my personal life, because when we think about that, we don't want to be rusing our loved ones, our family, our neighbors, or it's just, that's not the world we want to live in, right? We want to be legitimate stand-up people. Now, there are certain skills that can be valuable. We live in a world where it's difficult to get anybody on the phone, like when we need help for customer service, or when we need help for a product, or when we've kind of been screwed on some transaction. And in those cases, sometimes some of the rusing stuff can be helpful. So I think there is a time and a place where a little healthy exaggeration is okay, but rusing on a daily basis isn't something I would advise.
Robert Kerbeck, thank you so much. Really interesting stuff. Interesting career. Are you just retired now? I assume retired from rusing, but are you retired entirely?
Yeah, from the corporate spying. Yeah, I mean, I basically switched from offense to defense. So now I advise corporations and speak at conferences about basically how not to fall victim to cybercrime, social engineering, rusing, ransomware attacks, all of that stuff. And then, of course, I'm writing books now.
Great. Well, good. Looking forward to hearing more from you. Thank you very much. Really interesting stuff. I think the principles behind this are fascinating. I think building awareness of how this works and that there are people doing it is actually quite beneficial. I mean, you say you speak and train people. I think you'd probably agree that half of the game is knowing that somebody might actually do this, and roughly what that might look like is probably a large dose of the antidote.
Huge. I mean, look, knowledge is power, right? As soon as people at a corporation know that somebody could call up pretending to have an Irish accent, a German accent, whatever accent, all of a sudden now they're not going to fall for that ploy, right? So if I'm able to take you and your company through a series of ploys, compliance ploy, the accent ploy, the dropping the grapefruit ploy, whatever the ploy is, your people now are going to be educated that they're not going to fall for that, right? So yeah, knowledge is power.
Do we talk about dropping the grapefruit? What is that? That's just too weird sounding to let it go.
Well, the idea is, again, it's subterfuge, right? It's like, if I drop a grapefruit, it's like a magician, right? It's the sleight of hand. So what I want to do in certain ploys is I'm going to do something that's going to throw you off, right? I'm going to do something that's going to throw you off so that all you're focused on is the grapefruit is now on the ground, and the grapefruit is dirty, and the grapefruit is ruined. That's all you're looking at. Whereas now you're not seeing everything else that I'm doing, anything else that's going on. I'm in this example, I'm picking your pocket while you're watching me drop the grapefruit, right? You see, and the same thing, we would utilize that in the social engineering all the time too, is we would have some little thing that would throw them off. Like I said, it might be as simple as talking about, how many points LeBron James had the night before, or, oh my God, Serena Williams, did you see she won the, whatever it is that it's throwing them off, that they're now not aware of all the other stuff that you're going to be asking for.
Interesting. Misdirection. Well, that's a whole separate topic. Again, thank you very much. Really, really interesting. I appreciate your time, and definitely the book was a good read, and we'll link to that in the show notes as well.
Oh, thanks for having me, Jordan.
Thanks for checking out this entire episode of The Jordan Harbinger Show.
If you're interested in exploring this topic further, check out the Jordan Harbinger Show podcast feed. There, we dive even deeper on this and many other topics. In the audio podcast, I also close open loops, cover things discussed off camera, off air, and give some parting lessons from our guest. You can find the Jordan Harbinger Show in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, any podcast app, or at jordanharbinger.com. And also, if you found this episode useful, please share it with those you care about. Last but not least, like, comment, and subscribe.